Before we begin, thank you very much to Alan W. for pitching in over on Ko-fi. Thank you very much for the contribution, leaving me a little bit in the tip jar to help keep the lights on and the daily content coming. Always appreciated. So I'm going to be honest with you. Today's video was supposed to be a Here's 10. It was supposed to be like a full list of these things. Unfortunately, one, I couldn't think of any. But really, the ones we're going to talk about today are so significant that any others I could come up with besides these is basically nitpicking or just nature of the beast. When we talk QC issues, widespread chronic issues that plagued multiple figures over a certain period of time, we're not looking at things like, oh, well, some of the figures have loose joints. We're not looking at things like, well, this plastic is unpaintable. That's nature of the beast stuff. Same reason why mold degradation is not a thing here, because that's something that every single toy line will go through at some point. So I'm not going to count those. I found those are like nature of the beast. Those are things you can't really control. Out of 50,000 examples of a Transformer produced, a few of them are bound to have some loose angles that keep them from standing up, or a peg hole in their hand that's too loose to hold their weapon. These little variations happen for a multitude of reasons, and that's not what we're concerned with. I'm going to tell you the more chronic, serious issues that actually did come from just poor production or just someone really screwing up. And that is going to start with the Transmetal paint on the old Transmetal toys. The VAC chrome looks super cool, okay? And Transformers of the past used it in droves, and they had no issue with it whatsoever. Your G1 Optimus Prime can still have all of its original chrome, and it doesn't chip or flake off. It just kind of wears out and exposes the plastic underneath. And that's typically what you would expect of like chrome paint on a figure. But in this case, the Transmetal, for whatever reason, just had this way of just cracking and flaking in a way that, we have not seen the likes of since. This was a thing that happened over time to the original Transmetals, some Transmetal 2s, all the way into Beast Machines, with Jetstorm, the Ultra Class Jetstorm, being another infamous example of this. It's the kind of thing that makes me scared of any BotCon Cyclonus from that era, because it also uses the same type of chrome. Whatever technique they were using causes a lot of the Transmetals from that age to be extremely susceptible to just losing the paint completely, exposing what is usually an off-white plastic underneath that looks nowhere near as cool. This one's kind of personally affecting me right now because I have this sitting in my room. Hi, Kane, peeking out from behind. I didn't notice you there at first, but I have this Tripredacus Agent, super cool figure, looks really, really cool. And I keep thinking to myself, well, the yellow bubble makes this kind of unpleasant to display. The chrome looks like it's in good shape. I kind of want to take it out and just put it on a shelf to display. It looks really, really cool. But that's from a straight on angle. When I turn this figure, all of a sudden, these little reflections, these lots of vertical reflections start appearing in the chrome where it wants to split and flake, which is a big, big thing telling me do not open ever. It's unfortunate because it's a really cool looking figure and I didn't pay that much for it. So I kind of want to, but I know better. I know it will end in tears. Yeah, there's a whole run of really, really good toys that you really have to be incredibly careful with. Even if they're intact, you still have to treat them with kid gloves. I've seen, like that rat trap in the first photo. That was completely sealed, and it's still flaking. Lovely stuff. Here's another one that Hasbro themselves has flat out said this is hard. And that is the inconsistent yellow. So this comes in a few different forms. So to see a Bumblebee figure, it's not uncommon to see 3 different shades of yellow. The variation might be slight, but it is definitely there. And it is across the unpaintable palm plastic, the standard ABS, and anything painted over in yellow. Because for whatever reason, despite how many times Hasbro has done Bumblebees over the years, we can still get figures that do this. I have the 86 Bumblebee, where admittedly not a lot of its yellow is painted because it relies primarily on plastic molding. And that's what a lot of modern Bumblebees do in order to avoid this problem. But he does still have a little bit. He has a little bit on his, like, it's like the front bars around his windshield, like that front section of the windshield, the yellow there. That is still painted. And it does not match the rest of the toy at all. This comes in two different varieties. The one you see here is the translucent plastic. Really messes with the yellow paint, because the yellow paint in particular, this can happen with other shades, but yellow seems to be the most susceptible. The yellow is so light in color that clear plastic, even kept in other like dim conditions, will still let light through and will still have an effect on the overall vibrancy of the paint, making it stand out a lot from the more standard paint and the rest of the toy's yellow plastic. And then you have the other one, which is what I described on the 86 Bumblebee. They tried to paint black plastic with yellow paint, and that doesn't work. It throws the hue off. Like, even though the paint is, scientifically, this should match, once they get it on the toy, not even close. And because the way toy production is going, it's always rapid fire, always got the next toy in production, there's always something waiting in line behind it. They don't really have the time to just like spit out like 20 odd versions of a figure from the mold, slightly differentiating the hues of paint from each other, trying to get that perfect little mix. So they just kind of leave it as is. And we end up with a lot of like these really weird Bumblebees that kind of look like those scrapyard repair jobs where like there's like one door that is still primer colored. We end up with those a few times. But yeah, that's still, to this day, a problem. And you'd think they would have solved it by now, but no, still going. I haven't harped on this for a while, so allow me to stand on my soapbox just a little bit here, as we once again go into the world of translucent plastic. It's interesting to me because this used to be something that people went, oh, well, TJ's over exaggerating this. My toys are fine. It's just environmental, But no, like more and more people are kind of figuring this out. I did a whole video dedicated to this stuff. I took samples from all over the country and other parts of the world where people have shown me clear plastic on Transformers very easily breaking. The problem with the stuff is that it just isn't as durable as the ABS. In particular, as it ages, it becomes brittle faster than the solid plastic does. The result is something that is very easily damaged, and if it is being used for something like a tight hinge or a ball socket, something that's under constant pressure in order to do its job as a piece of the toy, you're going to end up with something that can potentially break on its own. I talk about this with my Beast Machines Hammer Strike, a little basic class shark guy that I actually really, really liked. My overall disdain for Beast Machines, doesn't apply here. I just really liked that little alien guy. And when I come home one day after he's been sitting on a shelf for months and his arms are by his feet because both clear plastic elbows have decided to self-destruct, that's really upsetting. And there's still part of me that takes that personally, especially because I don't want to pay $40+ to replace it today, just for it to happen again. But no, this is actually getting more widely known, especially as it's happening to more and more figures. 86 Jazz, this is an extreme example, don't get me wrong. I will admit, this could be very well intentional, but there was a problem with the clear plastic on the windshields of 86 Jazz. There were a frequent number of people reporting breaks on that piece. And because clear plastic gets more susceptible as it ages, there is the potential of those numbers increasing, which is why I'm glad they do all the cartoon accurate 86 figures that way, and just 84 cast in general, Generations cast in general. I'm ecstatic for them because I get to have them with no time bombs involved. Makes me very, very happy. But no, like recent figures like this remind you, like, it's not just age. Sometimes clear plastic just sucks. Sometimes it's just not a great material. Hasbro thinks it adds value. Hasbro thinks it makes it look like a higher quality product. I would like my high quality products to be durable, please. Thank you very much. Here's one that was brief, but it was fascinating because this happened never, never before and never since. In 2008, we had a small run of figures that, for one reason or another, had sticky paint. And we're not, even to this day, we are not sure why. So what happened was people would get their Prowls, Blue Streaks in, figures from around that era, those production runs, and the paint on the clear plastic would feel weird. Like, it would be tacky to the touch, but it could also be smeared and like even like wiped off the parts. The only thing we can figure is that for some reason there's just a run of figures, whether it's the clear plastic or the paint at the time, one or the other, but it did not bond. If I had my guess, it's very likely that the mold release that is put on these pieces, so they can be taken out of the molds easier once they're done, probably was not properly cleaned off before they took this to paint, and that caused the separation between the paint and the plastic. That's just me throwing a wild guess out there. We never really figured out why this was happening. We did know that even Takara didn't avoid this. I am showing you the Henkei version of Prowl because this one also had that exact same tacky, like loose paint problem. It also infested the other toy lines a little bit because the early sound waves in animated also had a sticky paint problem. Now, this one did get corrected fairly quickly. I put it in this list because it run through multiple figures on multiple toy lines for a while, and it's one of the strangest QC problems that we ever saw. Like, again, as I said, we have not seen it since, no matter how you view Transformer production and assembly today, or like what kind of value or quality you put on it, at least the paint stays in place still. I will give it that much credit. One of the big things that we've seen in the last few years is a rather new phenomenon, which didn't happen in previous toys, but now it does. And that is the yellowing of white parts, or just specifically very light shades of plastic on Transformer toys in general. This one is weird. It started just a few years ago, and it seemed to coincide with Hasbro shifting production from China to Vietnam. And something about that, especially around COVID era, where they couldn't go check in on the factories as often as they could in the past, something about that something went wrong. And again, we're still not even sure why it went wrong. All we know is that for whatever reason, during that phase, white plastic figures had this tendency to turn yellow over time. This is something that can happen with a figure that's left out in the sun as a form of photo degradation, but that wasn't what was going on here. Because with sun damage, this would happen over the area that's exposed to the UV light. Whereas on these, it was happening all over the pieces that were affected, regardless of sun exposure. Brand new pieces that had never been opened or even taken out of the case had this happen. Figures that were kept in storage under, inside like opaque plastic tubs, underneath beds, inside closets. People would go to them a year later and find very yellowed parts. And this is happening to really, really good toys. Happened to Netflix Soundwave. Kingdom Cyclonus was affected by this. Kingdom Tigatron was affected by this. This was a rough batch. This was a really rough issue. And the thing is, we still occasionally get this. Some people had their HasLab Ultra Magnus from the Omega Prime set. Some of them had yellowing plastic right out of the box. whatever reason, maybe like the factories cheap out on the plastic and think that like nothing's going to happen. Maybe there's something else going on. I think one person kind of figured out that might have something to do with like certain paint exposures. We don't know. We don't know. We know it can get very severe. We know that. So there's the Cyberverse RC versus like a 86 RC and how she's supposed to look. The weird thing is, I've seen this Cyberverse RC get so yellowed that the parts actually turn bronze. And the bronze and pink kind of hits, I'm not going to lie. It kind of looks cool. Just a little bit. Hasbro's aware of this one. We do know that they've taken measures to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. But like I said, every now and then, it still slips through. We are still a little bit cautious anytime we see a brand new toy that's going to have white parts, because they might be yellow someday. We're not going to know for a little bit. And then we're going to finish off with, well, this was going to be a top 10 of like major QC issues that Transformers have faced in the past, there really wasn't going to be any that topped gold plastic syndrome. So obviously, we're going to talk about QC problems. We got to talk about the king of them all. For those unaware, it is possible for plastic to become extremely brittle in a very short amount of time if it is done in gold. And not just gold, but literally any kind of metallic shade where there's been an improper mix to the plastic. Way too much of the metallic element that gives it that metal shine, or improperly mixed to the point where that metallic element has very dark swirls going through the molded plastic. That causes the plastic to be unable to bond with itself. And it even, what we suspected was essentially like plastic's version of aging or rusting, because it creates a lot more oxidation sites where air gets into the surface of the plastic. We need like actual scientific breakdown of that to really determine what. The point is, this metallic stuff is keeping the plastic from being as durable as it's supposed to be. So it ages exceptionally fast, becomes very brittle, and can be broken very easily. The Randy you see here is likely one of the Beast Wars 2 Randys that was so fragile you could crush it in your hand. And there is actually a very famous video amongst Transformer fans of someone doing just that, of someone literally crumpling this toy into shards just by squeezing it. This runs rampant through a lot of the 90s toys. This affects incredibly rare toys, all the way from G2 Protectabots, which weren't released, all the way to things like G1 Black Zarak, who I call Schrodinger's collectible. You know, as long as you never open it, it is both priceless and worthless at the same time, as long as you never figure out if the gold plastic on it is broken or not. The fun part is, on the Black Zarak, if you have one out on a shelf somewhere, it can still break under its own weight. So it's not even safe to just leave on a shelf idle. That's really bad. So yeah, the older this stuff gets, the more susceptible to this it gets. It's not every metallic plastic that this can happen to. And like I said, it's not limited to just, gold plastic. It can happen to silver. It can happen to brown. A good example, and one I just suffered a damage from, was the Beast Wars 10th reissue Dinobot, who has 2 shades of GPS-prone brown metallic plastic. Now, GPS is a problem that we thought we had a handle on. After about 2007, I think Cybertron Repugnus was the last time they actually used the stuff, and it was known to be fragile. We kind of got a handle on it, but it doesn't mean that things are invincible to this. So there were a few GPS toys reported since then, but the most recent one that we know suffers some form of GPS is the United Motormaster, who you see broken in half here. His waist is made of a metallic gunmetal plastic. improperly swirled, improperly mixed, extremely fragile. Now, it's not every batch that had that happen. It seems like they did correct it very quickly, but it's a reminder that some of these problems never go away. It's just a matter of time. And granted, we have not seen a GPS victim in amongst Transformers for the last decade or so, but that doesn't mean that, you know, all these toys we're getting now, some of which do have metallic plastic to them, are, you know, immortal. You never know. We just have to wait and see. So those are some of the biggest QC issues, and at the very least, maybe this states some maybe this states some curiosity, or maybe it educates, you know, especially if you might be hunting down some of the figures that are susceptible to these issues. Be aware that there are some problems that might be game breaking for you. You might not care about some mismatched yellow on a Bumblebee, but paint that is not going to, you know, paint that is potentially like going to be a mess someday, yeah, you want to know. So that's it. That's the list for now. You see why? Like, out of those 6, I can't think of anything that really compares. Those are 6 incredibly bad issues. Anything else would be nitpicking. And I'll admit, the yellow is nitpicking too. But it is what it is. So, let me know, do you have any horror stories of this stuff? Here, clear plastic, sticky paint, whatever it is, GPS. Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.